hearing from the crowds that you're tough as woodpecker lips.
He's apologising for kicking a drop goal.
Jorgensen, Max Jorgensen, no, he didn't. Oh my goodness me! Rock's there, Rock! He's got the record. Tom Wright, just too good. This is ecstasy for Wallabies fans.
Welcome back to the Scrum Bags Rugby Podcast, where your one-stop shop for everything Aussie rugby. I'm your host, Mitch. Joined with me again this week is co-host Lockie. Lockie, this is our Super W preview podcast / our Super Rugby Pacific qualifying finals preview. This is normally our extra time content coverage slot, but because it's Super W and we love the women's game, we've chosen to put this on the main feed. How excited are you off the top to be diving into another season of Super W?
Oh, well, Mitch, firstly, it's good to have you back on. It feels wrong without you on the airwaves on a weekend, but I'm so excited to get a bit of Super Dub action around. It feels like every year it just creeps up on us out of nowhere, but we got our little taste over the weekend with the double gold for the women's and men's sevens. It's got me in the mood because we've got some great inclusions in our Super W squads coming across from that program, and I just think that with a 7-week season, it needs as much hype and coverage as we can give it. So as you mentioned, usually behind the paywall on Patreon, this one's public. So please share the love. Make sure that you're getting around Super Dub across Stan Sport. We hope that there's a bit of free to air action. We don't know. It's probably not going to happen. But the more people who are talking about Super Dub, the more exposure it gets, the greater the platform is for these players to thrive and be seen. So I cannot wait to rip in. And of course, a little bit of qualifying finals action.
That's right. And so if you aren't already subscribed on Patreon and you do wonder what that is, generally it sort of has formed as our preview episode for the upcoming rugby content of the weekend. So if you're not so much, I don't think a lot of people generally on the main feed on a Sunday like to listen to a preview podcast that's done a week out when you don't know team sheets, you don't know what's happening and all the news and things that have gone on. So it's sort of taken that content, but it's also another space for us to do deep dives on a little bit more like niche subjects that maybe not everyone in the general population want to hear not long, but also just deep dives into some real nuffy rugby stuff. So that's also covered there on our Patreon Extra Time channel. So if you're not a subscriber, do go ahead and have a look there. And we've got some exciting things coming up, hopefully, for the Nations Championship and the Rugby Championships later in the year. So that's going to be definitely a space to dive in and to make sure you're following. But before we, instead of going on about what that is, let's get into the coverage for this weekend before we dive into Super W. And that is Super Rugby Pacific, the qualifying final. There is only 2 Australian teams left in the competition. Both the Force and the Waratahs have bundled out in spectacular fashion last weekend. But we do have 2 teams, the Reds and the Brumbies, in the qualifying finals. So to kick things off on Friday night, we do have the Brumbies going over to the Cake Tin to take on the Hurricanes in the 6 versus 1 qualifying final slot. Actually, before we actually get into the permutations of the names, the teams, and how we think that game's going to go, I want to get your thoughts, Lockie. Did you ever think that the Brumbies would be the team scraping in 6 and going to the Hurricanes or going to the first ranked team in a final series?
No, it feels weird seeing them qualify that low. I think, and when we will give it a full sort of season wrap down the line after the finals, but I personally felt as though just because of the exits the Brumbies had that they would slide below the Reds, but I thought they would both be higher. I think I had them 4th and 5th. 6 feels like a very sort of squeaky bum time, just scraping in. They very much trailed off at the start of the year. They were so good, knocking off all these big Kiwi teams that we're seeing at the back end of the season. So I'm a little bit surprised, but I like the matchup. I think it's really good to see them in a position where they have absolutely nothing to lose. They've very much been the home qualifying final, but then making up numbers in semi-finals. I wonder whether finishing 6 actually just breaks off the shackles a little bit and just sees them throw the kitchen sink at the Canes.
It is a little bit disappointing, I guess, from a wider Australian rugby context that they had after the Chiefs smashed the Blues last weekend, and there was that brief opportunity or glamour for them to potentially finish third, to get a good result against Moana Pacifica, and they absolutely shat the bed and lost and then finished sixth. So it's not a good end to the season by them, and it's probably not the preparation you want a week out from a qualifying final against what is proving to be an unstoppable Hurricanes team this week. But let's actually look through the team lists that the teams have named. And starting with the Hurricanes, this is probably the strongest team that they could have named without some of their big players available for selection. It's just reading through that team list, like it's scary. It's sort of like, where is the weakness in this 15? Where is the weakness in this 23? There's not anyone in this team list that I don't fear coming onto the field.
Yeah, and I think because it's finals, it's worth going through it, right? So Hurricanes 1-15, Mitch, Xavier Numia, Asafo Amua, Pasaleo Tosi as an all black front row. Caleb Delaney, the best pickup in the competition in Warner Dearns in the second row. Brad Shields, 100 games. Duplessis Karifi, co-captain Peter Lackey. That's just your starting pack. Then we go Cam Roigard, Ruben Love, form halves pairing of the comp. Kitty Naholo, Josh Morby on the wings. Geordie Barrett's back into 12. Billy Proctor partners him. Cal Harkin at the back, and then they're strong enough that they've got Tyrell Lomax as their replacement tight head, along with players like Arian Nare, Braden Yose, Zai Walker Liwaya. I think you're bang on. This is about the strongest team they can possibly field, and if anything, I see the weakness as being complacency, because physically and on the field, that's just about as perfect as it gets.
Well, I think we'll get to the Brumbies in a second, but if we look back to that Super Round clash between the Brumbies and the Hurricanes earlier in the year, it was a dominant performance by the Canes. Like, it completely blew the Brumbies out of the water, and they looked shell shocked. And it was the game that both Declan Meredith and Ryan Lonergan probably want to forget. They were both hooked either at halftime or close to in the second half, and the game was won and lost by that point, so there wasn't much they could do with Clayton Thorne and Tane Edmed coming on to replace them. But one player that did shine in that game and has been the standout this year is Fine Fainganofo. It is, I guess, disappointing from the Canes that he is injured and isn't available for selection this week. He is going to be a pivotal player for them. No doubt we'll see him play again. There's all these talks about New Zealand rugby doing crazy bonkers things of blocking contracts and keeping him in New Zealand rugby for future All Blacks inclusions and whatnot. But back to what I was saying at the start, that game, he was unstoppable. Like, he scored 4 tries in the opening half. He was everything good that they did, he had a hand in. So I think from a Brumbies perspective, it might be a little bit of a glimmer that he's not in this 23, that they don't have to worry about his ball running, his tackle busting, his finishing ability, that they do have fast finishing forward backs that look like forwards on the wings anyway, but not having him in the 23, particularly in the starting 15, probably is a little bit of a hope for them.
I think so, but we also have to put it down to the fact that while Finian Ganofo is having an incredible individual season, it's because he's on the end of such slick service from the Hurricanes. They have a pack that just powers their way forward physically. They've dominated every other side, and then it creates space for Love, for Roigard, for Barrett to put them in positions where they're either one-on-one or completely isolated and alone on the wing. So I don't think they actually lose a lot by having Kitty Naholo there as well, who was so good last year as well. Don't get me wrong, like, Finian Ganofo is a freak. It's much better for the Brumbies that he's not there, but I still think they have quality all across that back line. It is a major omission that I probably skipped, really, the fact that he's not in that team, but I think it speaks to the strength of their squad in general that we can kind of be like, oh, they're probably going to be fine.
I mean, he's only the leading try scorer in Super Rugby and potentially Super Rugby history. But that point aside, looking across the Brumbies 23, so starting up front, we've got James Slipper, Lockie Lonergan and Alan Alatoa. Alatoa has taken the captaincy this week, which is interesting because I think Ryan Lonergan has been a good captain so far this season. Probably for just continuity's sake, I would have liked to see him retain it throughout the finals. But in the second row, Lockie Shaw, Caden Neville, taking or rounding out the forward pack, Bobby Valentini at 6, Luke Reimer at 7, and Charlie Cale at 8. we'll come back to some talking points in a sec after this because there are a few. Ryan Lonergan starts at 9 with Declan Meredith at 10. Corey Toole on one wing. Andy Muirhead on the other, another talking point. David Feliawai and Hudson Crichton in the centres with Tom Wright finishing out the 15. Replacements, we've got Billy Pollard, Blake Shop, Reece Van Neck in the front row, Nick Frost and Rory Scott in the second row with Clayton Thorne, Tane Edmund and Ollie Sapsford to round out the back coverage. So I've sort of said that there are a few talking points there, and the one that I jumped straight to looking through this team is Luke Reimer starting in the 7 jersey. Have we seen it so far this season? Why are we doing that in a qualifying do-or-die final?
I think why not is more the question that needs to be posed. Like, Rory Scott, a tackling machine, makes decent go forward, but it's not the same physical impact that I think Reimer brings. And if Reimer is your star finisher, I don't think they're actually going to have the time in this game to allow him to finish. Like, the Hurricanes have blown away teams early across the board. I don't think Reimer coming on with 20 minutes to go peels back a 3 or 4 try margin. I think he's there to almost snuff out threats early. And when you look at that back row that they rolled out, the Canes in particular, like Shields, Carriffy and Lacker, you need someone who's a constant ruck threat. Rory Scott's great on ball, but that's his gold star. That's his specialty. So to have him on there early, I think is important because it's a good foil for Kale, who's a bit more wide running. And then you always have the option of bringing on Scott. You can shift things around a little bit with Valentini in the 8 jersey as well. So I think it gives him a bit more flexibility. I think young Toby McPherson probably a little hard done by in this setup, but I think like they have to go for experience, right? We see that across the board, and it's still a hell of a team that the Brumbies are rolling out. I like your points on the back line. Do you want to talk me through that?
Yeah, so I've been saying it for weeks for those that have been listening, and maybe a little bit more on our extra time coverage. But I think Andy Muirhead being slotted somewhere into the starting 15 is where the Brumbies look the best. And obviously, he's not going to kick out Tom Wright because Tom Wright, when he's on and he's incredible, but he probably hasn't quite hit that form so far this season. To have him slot into the wing and giving him, game time and minutes and the ability to include and inject in the game is really important for this Brumbies team. They've looked the best so far this season in attack when Andy Muirhead's on the field and particularly in the starting 15. Obviously, the injury to Caden Pritchard last week opens up the door for Muirhead to come into that 23, or come into that 15, with Ollie Sapsford on the bench, Hudson Crichton shifting into the centres as opposed to on the wing. I like having Andy Muirhead there, although having that injury to Pritchard does then open up questions about Hudson Crichton not necessarily delivering the same kind of punch, I think, in the centres that you probably need when you go up against a big, hard-hitting, defensive and strong attacking team like the Canes.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Pritchard is a big loss. I feel also that Crichton, what he lacks in punch, he probably makes up for in experience. Like, you've got a bloke in his sort of mid to late 20s there who's been around the traps a fair while now. I think he's probably floating up towards 50 Super Rugby caps, whereas Pritchard definitely sitting around the sort of 10 to 15 mark, if that, as a result of injuries.
Well, it's this year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's his first year aside from a debut against the Drua last year. So, like, very much in his infancy. And then you have Ollie Sapsford, who can equally cover centres and wings on the bench. I think they probably found a good balance there in Pritchard's absence. But Muirhead, you're absolutely right. We don't need to go into it again, how much we're a fan of him. But I think in particular, his kicking game and his kick chase pressure is going to be so effective. It's the work that he does off the ball that makes him such an invaluable back three asset wherever he is on the wing or at fullback. And that allows Tom Wright to be a little bit more creative. They can link up better in attack. Most importantly, it creates opportunities in space for players like Corey Toole to run off the hip and go. So I like what we're going to see there. It is so much pressure on Decky Meredith, his first sort of final run in the cutter as a starter. So really excited to see how he goes. And I like that Alan Alatoa has taken the captaincy off Ryan Lonergan because it frees him up to concentrate on other things, to make sure that the team itself is clicking in attack and defence and not worry about the referee exchanges. So I like the balance of it. What I struggle with is still, I think, the the Thorn Edmed off the bench. Yes,
Yep.
Kane was great in Super Round, but he just hasn't had many opportunities, and it's just because he hasn't had time on the park. It doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. I want to be proven wrong, though.
Yeah, the big fear I have is that that either Declan Meredith or even Ryan Lonergan, probably Ryan Lonergan to a more extent, if he picks up an injury early, I think you pretty much write off this Brumbies team, and it's almost that. And I know he won't say this in the media, but Stephen Larkham has pretty much like said through his selection so far this year, he does not trust Edmed or Thorne to do a job for him. And it's been pretty evident through his selections, through the amount of minutes that these guys have played. And so they both need to get through at least 60 minutes if the Brumbies have any hope of potentially pulling off a miracle. Do you see that happening though? Like looking at this, do you see any chance that the Brumbies go to Wellington and actually perform a miracle and kick the Canes out?
I mean, there's always a chance, but it's gonna feed into our chat for the Reds, right? Like, why would you back them when it's never been done before? Like 21-0 record for Aussie teams in finals. I think it's possible. I think the quality that you have in there around not only just test players but their cohesion as a Brumbies unit, I think it's doable. But what I fear is that the Canes just get away early because they've done so all season and just blow them off the park with their physicality around the pack and their ability to unlock quick recycle ball to the Naholos, to the Morbies. I can't tip the Brumbies. I don't think I'm going to tip either Aussie team, to be honest, Mitch, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I like it's very slim. If it's possible, it's like very, very slim, and you need probably like I think it was mentioned on the pod last week, 4 red cards in the first 15 minutes to the Canes. There's just I don't see a way. I don't see any area that the Brumbies are actually better than the Canes in, and even the Brumbies at their best against the Crusaders earlier in the year. That was probably more down to the Crusaders sort of falling apart as opposed to the Brumbies, wearing them down. Yes, they played well and they took the opportunities that were ahead of them. But, I don't think that I don't expect a Canes team to show up and choke and just fall apart. I mean, they have perennially been chokers, but that's going to be next week. That's the talk for next week, because I don't think this is the game where they choke and fall up. So it's probably going to be Canes by a lot. Like we always say, if an Aussie team comes within a bonus point loss of a Kiwi team, that's a win so far this season.
Yeah, I think the Brumbies can push it close. I think I'm probably going to tip Canes by 15, though. That's what it feels like. It feels like the kind of game that the Canes will race out and the Brumbies can claw back, but just never enough. I hope I'm wrong. Like, please prove us wrong, Brumbies. It would be such a wonderful upset to be able to celebrate and champion, but it requires luck and every Brumbies player outpointing their opposite, and Ben O'Keefe to potentially give a little bit of wriggle room to the Aussies, which is not typical.
It feels like we need Ben O'Keefe to find his Aussie passport at the bottom of his...
something. A long-lost ancestry list, or I don't know, maybe some friendly words, maybe slipped bill on the side. Like, I don't know, but we need something to go our way, and for it to go away for 80 plus. So yeah, it's Canes for me.
Yeah, it's Canes for me as well, and it's probably Canes by a lot, unfortunately. We'll just gloss over the next game, which is the Crusaders hosting the Blues, only because I am conscious of time. We don't want to do too much of a deep dive, but I've said before on the podcast, I'm actually scared that the Crusaders are finding form, are selling out their One New Zealand Stadium in Christchurch, and at this point, they look unstoppable. So I'm scared for the Blues. I'm scared for the sake of the competition, and I'm scared that trophy doesn't have to leave Christchurch ever again.
Yeah, they're not losing this game in my book. We'll happily hang myself out to dry if the Blues get it done, but they won't. This is a Crusaders side that has hit form perfectly in time for finals. Aside from the absence of Will Jordan, which didn't really hinder them last week, beating up a sort of Hurricanes second side, they've got all the bases covered. It's great to see their pack hitting their strides. Lester Funganuku's completely changed the way that they attack because it gives them an extra back, and I see them winning this by plenty. So Blues, in my opinion, Blues are the luckiest team to be in finals at this point. Very much have come off the ball in the last month, and I think are destined for a bit of a spanking in Christchurch. What about you?
Well, the Blues find themselves in that lucky fourth place spot, so they're very much at this point forming to be the second, or that team that gets a second shot next week, unless some other miracle happens elsewhere. I think realistically, for me, the only way that the Blues can win this game is if they do something a little bit different, and that's not so much about rugby. That's trying to tinker with the pyrotechnics at halftime. You saw last week that when you let off fireworks in a enclosed stadium without any ventilation, it just sits and it becomes like impossible to play rugby in. So
Which
what I'd be
Bright
doing,
Spark approved that.
I know it's like there was an apology post posted the next day on social media, and I was like, did you not even do a trial run the day before? Like, who thought that was a good idea? No. You can't even open the windows on either side. Like, those big fans were working overtime and they're not doing anything. But what I'd be doing if I was the Blues, I'd be trying to find some way to get a bit more kindling into those fireworks and make sure that there's as much smoke or pellets or whatever that needs to go in, so that at halftime it goes, oh, sorry, guys, we can't play the second half. We can't see anything. That's the only way that you're stopping this Crusaders team at the moment.
That's what it feels like. It's Crusaders by, I think, probably 2 or 3 tries, generously. And I feel like Nick Berry as well gets a good sense of momentum in games, particularly in Kiwi derbies, and all the momentum is with the Crusaders at the moment. So it's a pretty easy run-in for me. They're going to go through and make the semis pretty easily, and unless barring a big upset, I think the Blues will too. Lucky bastards.
Yeah. So the last qualifying final, not quarterfinal, qualifying final, is your Queensland Reds boys travelling over to Hamilton to take on the Chiefs. So we'll run through the 23s quickly in this one. So Chiefs have got Ollie Norris, Semesi Takiaho, sorry, Sione Aho, Josh Lord, Tupou Vai'i, Simon Parker, Luke Jacobson, Wallace Satiti, Cortez Radamar, Damien McKenzie, Kyron Tamaufalau, Quinn Tupaia, Kyle Brown, Liam Coombs, Fabling, Isaac Hutchinson on the bench, Brody McAllister, Jared Prophet, George Dyer, Sesu Naitoiakoi, Semapeni Finau, Toyora Taiorangi, Josh Jacob, and Leroy Carter. I'm surprised actually that Leroy Carter is not starting in this one.
I think he usually would, but like Liam Coombs Fabling has been excellent across wing and fullback. Isaac Hutchinson, I think this is very much a vote of confidence in his ability. He's been doing some great things over the past few weeks for the Chiefs, and with Amoni Narawa out of the mix, I think they've got the coverage from Carter on the bench if they need it. Remember, he can also cover the 13 channel too. So a pretty inexperienced 13, 14, 15 that the Chiefs have rolled out. But aside from that, this is a big, dirty, scary forward pack with the best player currently in the competition lining up for them at 12. Like Quinn Tupaia is at the heart of everything good about what the Chiefs do at the moment. He's direct, he's skillful, he's very much in that triple threat Ma'anonu back end of his career mold. So the biggest inclusion for me, however, is that they just bring back D-Mac. Darren McKenzie straight back into the mix at 10. They haven't gone with a Jacob McKenzie axis, which I found interesting. I thought they might go dual playmakers to control things out of the boot a little bit more and pin the Reds back even further. But that's something that they can lean on as well, with Tahori Orangi coming off the bench as well, his box kicking game with Ratama. It's a great 1-2 punch. Aside from that shit, like, come on, that's basically an all-black pack. No one's upset with rolling that out. Wallace Satiti back in form, back on the park. Tupou Vai'i was pretty sure rested last week, along with a lot of these boys who didn't play in that thrashing of the Blues. This is a Chiefs team that is red hot.
It is. And so across the Queensland team that is travelling over to Hamilton to hopefully make history and cause an upset. So we've got Aiden Ross, Josh Nasser and Zane Nongor up front. Josh Canham, Lukai Salakai Loto in the second row. Joe Bryle, Fraser McWright and Harry Wilson rounding out the pack. Tate McDermott and Carter Gordon in the halves. Tim Ryan, Filippo Daugunu, Josh Fluke, Lockie Anderson and Jock Campbell out the back. The replacements, and there's an interesting name in here, is Matt Fazler, George Blake, Massimo DeLutis, Hamish Muller, Vaitu Latu, Kalani Thomas, Ben Volavola, and the wonder kid Trayvon Pritchard has made his 23 jersey for the first time in a Super Rugby qualifying final that we were both talking about last week. Didn't think we'd see him this week.
Yeah, it's funny that we start with someone on the benches being the biggest call, but I feel very strongly about this, and I think he's got all the skills in the book. They've very much taken a gamble on him, though. You do have other coverage there out the back that could have slid across. I feel a bit for Dre Pakaho as a more experienced player who can cover the midfield, especially given they're taking a gamble on Filippo Dalgunu in the 12 jersey. What's that, his second or third start ever at inside centre, and it's coming in a qualifying final against Quinn Tupaia. But Dalgunu's been so good that they have to find space for him. So Pritchard does get that role, and I'm excited, but I'm nervous for him. It's a great opportunity, and so much inexperience when you look at that bench, like coming into the mix. Like this would be the first time around for Hamish Muller, Vita Latu in that mix. But I think this is just about as strong a starting 15 as the Reds can manage on paper, Mitch.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's great to see both Tate McDermott and Carter Gordon back and fit and able to really take a hold of this game, because we saw last week against the Drua that they were so pivotal in that win, that when the pressure actually came on and the Drua started to actually get ascendancy, it was Carter Gordon who booted that ball 90 odd meters to turn things back around. They score shortly afterwards. And so you need that kind of that confidence from your playmakers. And I think with the backs outside them, like Tim Ryan's in his third year of Super Rugby, Josh Fluke and Jock Campbell, Lockie Anderson, they're all great, but they are relatively inexperienced in terms of post-season qualifying finals and doing things that like going over and causing history. So it's a big ask for this team, and it is a Reds team that, if you compare this team to what that 2011 team was that won Super Rugby, like the age differences, the age profiles, the experience of the players is vastly different. This is a much more inexperienced side, and like they've got a challenge ahead of themselves. But I don't put it past them. I think what we've seen from the Reds so far this year, when they hit their straps, when they hit their full potential, they're unstoppable. And so if they can play like that, it's going to take 80 minutes and it's going to take a hell of a defensive effort. But I think at the moment, out of all of the Super Rugby teams in Australia, they are the team that I have most confidence to go to New Zealand and actually cause history and cause an upset.
Yeah, I agree. And without completely writing off the Brumbies, even though it kind of feels like we have.
No, they're done. They're done. They're dead. That horse is dead. He's in the glue factory.
He's at the knackery. It does feel like the Reds have the strongest chance, and I guess it makes sense given their form line and the Brumbies dropping off, the Reds starting to pick up. I feel that they have been really hurt by an injury to Seru Uru. That changed the makeup of that starting pack for me, but he is out with a back injury. So that's why they've got Joe Braille back in. That's why Hamish Muller's come on. And Muller, solid, great, still very young and very raw. Same deal with Braille. Even though he's in his third or fourth season, Uru is a capped wallaby and offers so much around the line out and around his wider running. That, for me, is the really big linchpin, especially when you consider the makeup of that Chiefs pack and how dominant they are in the air. Jacobson, Satiti, Parker, along with Arcoy and Tupo Vai coming on. Like, they have so many good line-out options. So that's what shored up the line-out for the Reds against the Drua. Having Uru there, it creates doubt in the defence's mind. I feel like they've lost a key option. So that almost like pegs them back a couple of points in my book on field because of their avenues to build from set piece. That being said, I think you're right. I think they can do it. Again, I don't think they will. I just what we saw from the Chiefs last week off the back of their B side beating up the Blues was really ominous. And this is a game that we've seen before, right? How many times has the Reds gone over in the past couple of years and gone down swinging in a qualifying final? Maybe 3 times in the past 4 seasons.
Yep.
I think they know the challenge that's ahead of them. I'm going to tip a close game, but I'm just not sure that the quality off the bench in the forwards is going to match what the Chiefs can bring on. And that's why I'm going to say Chiefs by 10. What are you feeling?
Yeah, I think this game, if the Reds have any chance of actually causing the upset and getting the win, they need to be clinical. They need to play smart rugby. Like you just highlighted there, without Seru there, that puts a lot of pressure on Josh Canham to actually solve the line-out issues. And I think that's a lot of pressure to put on one player. We've seen the line-out was fixed last week, and has been poor for the weeks prior where Josh Canham wasn't available. Hopefully he can still bring that, knowledge and that experience to make sure that that area is firing. Because if they can't get their line out functioning, there's no way that they're going to be able to stay in this game. Like if they can't go into the Chiefs 22, go to line out and actually convert from it, write them off. Like it could be 50-0. This Chiefs team is so good, particularly in counter-attack, that if they're losing their own ball at set piece, it's game over. In saying that, they need to make sure that they play in the right areas of the field. They need to go down there. They need to actually play not les kiss rugby. And if they get penalties, just kick them all day. Like apply scoreboard pressure. We saw last year that the Chiefs are actually beatable in a quarterfinal or a qualifying final if you apply scoreboard pressure. Last year was that stupid year where the Chiefs actually lost and then got another bite of the cherry because they and got to host. Like that was ridiculous.
It was bullshit. The Port Brumbies got dudded last year.
Yeah, it was bullshit, but it happened, and it could happen again. And so, but the Reds need to be perfect, and I just with both Seru Uru out and Hunter Paisami, who have been probably their two best players so far this year, like it almost feels like it's a job too much.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It would be just like for the Brumbies, this would be arguably the biggest win in club history outside of a final for them to get this done over in New Zealand. History, as we said, points to a pretty comfortable Chiefs win at the end of the day. Again, it takes every player to put in a worldie. I mean, milestone maybe. Fraser McGrath's 100th game for Queensland. There's a bit floating around there with Aussies winning well on milestones, but I can't see it, unfortunately. So as a result of the Blues finishing fourth, I'm going to pick an all-Kiwi semi-final and just pray to high heaven that we see some bit of magic over the weekend, Mitch.
Can I just say, like, looking at the ref appointments for this weekend, and we'll move off this in a sec because I know people want to listen and hear about our Super W preview. But looking through the ref appointments, so on Friday night with Cairns Brumbies, we've got Ben O'Keefe in the middle. On Saturday afternoon down in Christchurch between Crusaders Blues, we've got Nick Berry. And then taking charge of the Chiefs and Reds is James Dolman. How does Dolman get a qualifying final? Like, where's our boy Angus Gardner? I mean, this is far enough out. Like maybe we don't see Angus next week, but surely they don't rest Angus Gardner this week so that he can ref the final.
Oh, maybe. I would probably pick the top two refs at the moment in Super Rugby as Paul Williams and Angus Gardner, just on performance's sake. So maybe that's who we're going to see in the semis, and then out of those five. Them? Well, no, but it's an opportunity, right? They're essentially auditioning to see who is in the middle for the final. So I imagine if these are the appointments for the qualifiers, that's what we're going to see in the semis. I don't necessarily agree with them. I would have loved to see Gussie Gardner involved in some capacity. I think it's just still cast doubt in the minds of everyone when we have Trans-Tasman games. Why do we have these referees?
Surely we can get Yakko Piper out of retirement.
Drag him out of Springbok camp and get him across. But it did remove so much of the unconscious concerns that people have around referee appointments. All we can do is hope and see. I don't think the Reds will be stoked. I'm agreeing with you. But yeah, that's what's been made. So we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure if there are contentious calls that go against the Reds, it'll be pulled up again. All I can say is that Queensland are very happy it's not Marcus Plale.
That's very true. And I guess the only thing almost the referee in the middle is probably not the person that you actually have to scrutinise at the moment. It's almost the TMO. So Glenn Newman's in the TMO chair for the Reds and Reds Chiefs game, and let's just hope that he's actually at his post and watching the game and not off getting beers or checking on his sports bet account because he could be busy.
I mean, who wants to be a TMO these days? Like, it seems like such a thankless task.
Loves it.
The big dog. Yeah,
he loves
big dog, Brett Cronin.
He loves it. Anyway, let's keep going because we are the meat of this episode was meant to be the Super W preview, and we've already spoken 33 minutes on Super Rugby Pacific. So, Lockie, take us away on our Super W 2026 preview.
Yes, and thank you for sticking around and sticking with us. We did want to give this the right amount of time, so forgive us if we settle in a little bit to talk about this. Again, bit of a sprint season. We're going through 7 weeks, so 5 rounds. Everyone plays each other once. The 5 teams obviously being New South Wales Waratahs, Queensland Reds, ACT Brumbies, Western Force, and Fijian Drua. I'm not sure whether the wording is Fijiana Drua or Fijian Drua, so we're going to have to clear that up before we get started. I'm pretty sure it's Fijian, and we stick from there because Fijiana are their national teams. Regardless, all these teams have been named. You can go and find the squads up on rugby.com.au. That's your best source of content for all the upcoming Super Rugby Women's. And the opening round is here. So it's going to be the Waratahs hosting the Fijian Drua at Leichhardt. That's on Saturday afternoon at about 2 o'clock, live and exclusive on Stan Sport as all these games are. And then Sunday afternoon, the Reds up against the Brumbies at Ballymore. So a couple of good little bits to float around through here. Again, if you want full team season breakdowns, squads, ins and outs, make sure you go across Alicia Newton over at rugby.com.au, who also does media for the Wallaroos and Sevens, has done squad by squad breakdowns, which are really, really good. But just a couple of, I think I just want to go through a general sort of oversight of how all these teams have gone so far in the past few Super Rugby seasons. And I think we have to start with the Tars, because they have been the dominant force in women's rugby for such a long time. They won all 4 titles before the Drua were included, and those were the only 2 games they lost, were back-to-back finals. They are very much the dominant force in women's rugby, Mitch. And again, they're going to roll out a seriously strong squad. They've just dropped their team for the opening round, and we see the return of Caitlin Hulse straight into fullback. I don't really, it's a bit like going through the Canes and the Chiefs. There's not really many weaknesses when you go through the team that they're going to roll out against the Drew on the weekend.
Yeah, I think one thing that has always been, when we talk Super W, one strong thing that New South Wales always have is that they've got a really strong key player pool, and they've almost like the spine of a team is very much Wallaroo heavy. So you start to go through their pack, through their backs, like the names that start to jump off the sheet. And this is just focusing on this weekend, not necessarily just their wider squad. But so Wallaroo's players all the way through. So Brianna Hoy, Adiana Talakai, Bridie Gorman, Caitlin Leaney, Piper Duck, M. Chance. You've got Desi Miller in there, Caitlin Hulse, Georgina Friedrichs. There's some really strong names in this Waratahs team, and that's what they've come to rely on in seasons, which have ensured their success for the past few seasons. What is, I guess, a little bit different, I would say, about this season is there's actually some new names that are actually starting to come into the 23, into the wider squad. They've seen some names move on. It's been spoken about widely, the number of players who've left rugby to go across to NRLW or other forms or retirement or whatever it's been. But looking through this Waratahs team for Saturday, so the team list, if you haven't heard it, so we've got Brianna Hoy, Adiana Talakai, Bridie O'Gorman, Lalani Nathan, Caitlin Leaney, Piper Duck, M. Chancellor, and Nicole Nathan. So Lalani Nathan's sister at number 8, which is going to be exciting to see. Piper Simons, Ploani Clevitt, Desi Miller, Rosie Ferguson, Georgina Friedrichs, Emily Whitaker, and Caitlin House. Now, actually, a question for you, Lockie. Is Amelia Whitaker related to Chris Whitaker?
It very well may be another Whitaker. It's hard to say. There are so many Whitakers floating around Australian rugby, so forgive us for assuming.
If that is the case, and we're gonna say that it is, and if it's not, we apologise now. But if that is the case, we've also got another debutant on the bench who has a very famous name in Eddie Burke, which is the daughter of the great Matt Burke, who has now joined Stan Sport. So there is a chance this weekend that we see 2 daughters of 2 very great former Waratahs and Wallabies players making their debuts for the New South Wales Waratahs.
Yes, plenty of that going around. Lots of good new names on the bench. I think a lot coming through the Sydney rugby programs as well, which is obviously very strong women's rugby base. But I'm most excited to see Piper Simons in the mix for the Tars. We know that they've had lots of movement in that field. The halfback, the exit of Lane Morgan last year, now this year, the exit of, you're going to have to help me out here, Tatum Bird, Mitch,
Yep,
heading
yep,
across to
yep.
league as well was a big out. So to have Piper Simons, who's already capped at Wallaroo level, come in after that experience and start sort of running the cutter out of 9 with an untested 10 is really exciting because we know she's got such a great running game from sevens. Really keen to see what she can do linking up with the likes of Piper and Chance at the back of that scrum. A lot of experience there off the bench too, like Britt Merlo capped Wallaby, M. Robinson, one of the most capped of all time at Waratah's level, if not the most. And it's just a good vibe around Super W to see that even without Maya Stewart, who's out with injury at the moment, they still have so many strike weapons.
Yeah, and another player that I'm actually really excited to see get more game time. I think she did play some minutes last year, but Martha Harvey, who is the sister of the wonder kid Sid Harvey, who we all know has done massive and incredible things for the Waratahs men's team this season. If she's anything to go, if the genes run in the family, I'm excited to see what she can do. I think she is a scrum half, so she is the replacement scrum half who will come on. So maybe she'll get a little bit more ball than what her brother Sid gets, but really excited to see what she can do in a bit of space.
How cool is this as well? I just saw the coverage from Alicia Newton. Peony Cleavitt has played for the Netherlands in rugby, which is so cool. So there's
she was their captain too.
How sick's that? It's awesome to see that kind of movement in and out. And I think that's what I love about Super W. You're constantly surprised by new things coming.
And I think just generally, I guess, what a competition wide, this year is probably the first time we've actually seen so much international talent actually lacing up the boots in Super W. It's not just in New South Wales Waratahs, and we'll talk about it as we get to the other teams. But there's former Black Ferns playing. There's capped Japanese internationals playing. There's, as we just said, there's Netherlands captains playing as well. So like the talents is spread far and wide, and it's great to see that this competition is actually bringing the likes of those players into Australia to bolster the talent that we have here.
Well, you've taken us right there. We'll go to the other game, the Reds and Brumbies, because then we can tick off 2 squads to go through as well. Interesting year, I think, ahead for the Reds. A lot of talent that has departed over the past 12 months. A couple of interesting new faces. You touched on a Black Ferns recruit. They don't come much bigger than Tanya Kalanovalu, who comes across as tight head coverage for the Reds. You've also got some really interesting pickups. Akira Kelly into the fly half role. Laurie Kramer's obviously back from Hong Kong. She slipped to fullback. Sarah Doherty's still around. She takes over the 9 with Lane Morgan moving to rugby league. So lots of key changes out in the mix. They've also lost Caitlin Irwin, which was a really big out. She was in that Wallaroos squad last year, which may have surprised some people, but plenty of quality, and the Broncos have snapped her up for NRLW. So that's another player lost across to the 13-woman code. But nevertheless, bit of excitement around Ava Rowetta. We saw her get a taste of Wallaroos gold towards the start of this year, still in her teens. She'll line up at 12 this weekend for the Reds, rather. But then when you look at the Brumbies team that they're going to roll out, it feels like they've got a lot of experience to draw upon.
Yeah, I think focusing a little bit on the Reds before we shift across to the Brumbies, looking through this squad, like, I must admit, I was quite worried, and I am worried for this Reds team in 2026. They've lost 16 players and their coaches. Like, it's been a massive off season for the Reds. We know that towards the end of last season, there was some whispers going on that there was a bit of a disconnect between coaching set up at Queensland and the bit of a player revolt going in. So I think it was inevitable that there was going to be a coaching change for Queensland, but having that come in and then losing 16 players and some of the talent that they did lose was through the Sevens program. So some of the names that have on the out sheet, like Charlotte Kazik was playing Super W last year. You had the Levi sisters sort of on the books, not necessarily actually, I don't think they played, or Tegan might have played a little bit. I don't think we saw Maddie play. And some of the other Sevens girls who haven't necessarily come back this season, who were trying to sort of get their claim for inclusion in the Wallaroo squad at the World Cup last year. But outside of that, like looking across this team, we've had the inclusion of those props, like you said, the Black Ferns, but then actually focusing on the team that's named to play this weekend, outside of Eva Karpani and Laurie Kramer, it's a pretty inexperienced squad.
Yeah, a lot of mixing arounds. They've done some interesting stuff around, like Gemma Bemrose doing good things as Skip has been for the last year. Dylan Blackburn on the rise along with Denny Ross. Tiana Malloy in the past few years has shifted from hooker to number 8. So it feels still quite experimental. So we've got some interesting times ahead for the Reds. I think there are going to be some teething pains, especially over the first few rounds. Like when I look at the matchup with the Brumbies in particular, I actually think the Brumbies are in a pretty good position, but there's still some decent experience there. I think it's a big year ahead for players like Bree Dascombe, who are going to have more on their plate. Harmony Vital comes across as pretty experienced as well, and I just think because of the unknowns, like it's hard to say how the Reds will go. I do fear that they might struggle to reach a grand final like they did last year, though.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. Like you look at their team last year, they got to the grand final and they pushed the Waratahs. Obviously, they didn't win that final, and so you were kind of hoping that this would be the year that they could get revenge. They could keep that squad together, but to lose that much talent and have that much turnover, they're almost starting fresh this year. And look, you'll have to refresh my memory for the trial form, but I believe they went through undefeated in their 2 games.
Yeah, two from 2. I think they got rid of the Brums quite comfortably in the trial match, which surprised me actually. They put 50 on them, which is interesting now that I look at this squad and I think, oh gee, Brumbies are in good nick. So hopefully I'm proven wrong and my girls can get up. And then they beat the Drua sort of last gasp last weekend, just gone on the buzzer. Yeah. So very, very excited, happy to be proven wrong. But like if you want to take us through this Brumbies team, it feels like for me they're in a better position.
Yeah, so looking at this Brumbies team and just a bit of context for those who haven't necessarily followed Super W the last few years, they were winless in 2025 and I think it was the last few rounds of 2024 before they had got a win as well. So it's been a while since Brumbies land, particularly in the women's game, has tasted a bit of success. Looking through the squad this year, though, they've bolstered their talent with the signings of Ivania Wong, which is great, coming down from Queensland. So that's a player that we'll look out for. But looking through the team that they've named this weekend, so up front they've got Martha Fua, Tanya Naden, Wako Kitano, Ash Fernandez, Jess Grant, Lily Bone, Raina Ellis, Sika Pesi-Palu, who's got the C next to her name, Anne Fernandez Coderas, Ella Ryan, Ivania Wong on one wing, which is a new position for her, which is exciting. Marania Parone, Boney Brewer, Ash Bishop, and Fatal Maleka at 15.
Yeah, I like the Bonnie Brewer. I'm pretty sure used to be a halfback, so there's a bit of movement around in the mix there. And Fernandez de Corres, I've just seen coming across
Ivania
from
Wong
Spain.
used to play halfback as well?
No, Vani's always been a winger.
Oh,
always
been
a winger.
Well, there we go.
Yeah,
for some reason in my head, I thought she was a halfback. So apologies for that. I've just thrown that one out there.
That were all good, but like they've got some good, solid players in their spine. Like Tanya Naden, very experienced. Pesi-Palu, obviously Wallaroo skipper, and then like Tala Maleka at the back is, I think, that's really key. It offers a kicking game, a good foil for Laurie Kramer on the other side of this game. So I think like they're in a pretty solid position to be able to bring on Easter Savalio and Tabua Tuinaka-Vadra, I think is a really good punch for them off the bench. We'll get to a bit of Boo news in a little bit around Tuinaka-Vadra's movements. That'll sort of form the end of this once we've touched on the force. But I think they've got a lot of punch in there. There will be a lot of responsibility on players like Lily Bone coming off like their first taste of Wallaroos to like bring the physicality. I think she can probably be one of the more dominant players in Super W this year. So excited to see how she goes there. And just excited for an Aussie derby to get us off and running. It's going to be a great matchup. And if you can get down to either of these games, to Leichhardt Oval on Saturday or to Ballymore on Sunday, I strongly encourage you to do that. It's going to be a great atmosphere, good cheap tickets, make sure you get a good seat and enjoy some really good quality footy.
Yeah, it's actually just that highlights. Before I get to that point, sorry, the player I was referencing before, in our sort of preview, Wako Kitano is the Japanese import who's come in for the Brumbies. So she's actually starting in the 3 jersey this week. So it's a good opportunity to see what she can bring that first round of competition this weekend. It is a little bit interesting, or I guess disappointing, that we don't have the likes of that. Well, what do we call them? Panina Pacifica, I think that was called last year.
Yeah, bang on.
Not in some way featured in the competition this year. Like for the Force women to not be able to play this weekend and to only have 2 games a weekend with 4 teams competing, it's a missed opportunity. I mean, surely there's enough talent in these squads to, even if it's not Penina, like I know that was reliant on a lot of government funding and things to sort of back up and prod up, and there was a lot of, travel and hotel costs and all that type of thing. But even if we could brought back the old President's 15 or some kind of like development pathway team to be the 6th team, like surely there's more that could be done for the women's game to not have to only play 7 games in a season and a team sits out every single week. Like it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it's tough. And like if we're being brutally honest, it's as a result of the Fiji and Drua being part of it as well. I think if it was a 4-team comp, you probably play 8 rounds and then one just plays 2 to get into it that way. So I think it offers a bit more variety in that regard, having the Drua. It's also a good commercial driver for people tuning in, plus the funding comes from Australian government and the Department of Foreign Affairs. So it makes sense in that regard. I would love if it was 6 teams, though. I just don't know who fills that role. Like, does South Australia have a I mean, do Melbourne, do Vic field a team? Is there basis for potentially a second Rugby Australia team, a la President's 15, that's based out of Sydney to keep costs down? That seems to be where most of the talent is in the women's game currently. So perhaps that's an avenue that I can look forward to. But I agree, missing a uncapped game of sorts against Penina and the pathway that they provide is huge. I've seen that they had a I think they had a Penina series over in Tonga and Samoa maybe last month, which is the whole point of that funding, right? They're developing players on island. So it's great in that regard. But yeah, missed opportunity.
Yeah, and so let's before we finish off, we need to touch on the Western Force as well, because they're not playing this weekend, but they are included in Super W this year. So Lockie, did you want to take us through your thoughts on the Western Force?
Just big outs for me. Like the Ash Masters heading across to NRLW, I think can't be overstated. That's our biggest Wallaroos name, I think. Also, like coming off the back of all the exposure that they got around like the rivals competition, and Ash being the poster girl for Union and now being over in League is, I think, a pretty bitter pill to swallow. So she's off. Georgia Cormick is off as well, who's been a very reliable halfback for them. Tamika Jones, both of those Kiwi affiliated, have gone. A few new faces as well. But for me, I think what's really exciting is how many people got a taste of Wallaroos at the start of this year who were involved in the Force last year. So like I'm talking specifically about Nicole Leddington and where she can take this team as a 5'8" and a game-driving 5'8" as well. So she got that great debut against Fijiana at the start of the year, right? She had 3 or 4 test matches through the year. Her and Brooklyn Teki Joyce get some really interesting opportunities now to be the feared people in Super Rugby W. We saw Teki Joyce do great things last year. I think her and Leddington can really help drive this as well. And the fact that you've still got Ceci Smith, Michaela Leonard, Sam Wood, all these seasoned players helping to drive it is massive. Trelane Pomare, she's still around the mix too, which is really exciting because you can't get rid of her. She's so reliable in the middle of the field there. Throw in some people who are sort of floating in and out. I feel really bad for Catalina Ramosa. I thought she was in a really good position sort of towards the end of, end of last year, where she was doing really good things through the World Cup, starting to get preferred. That was super exciting. And then, of course, like you have some really exciting people coming across that we've seen kind of through like community rugby, like Aisha Wigley. So I think the Force showed last year that they are a really potent attacking team that can also grind and go to their bigger players. Tamika Jones, who I touched on a little earlier, is a big loss. She did a lot of the good things on the side for this team. But I think they're very much they should be expecting nothing more than a final. I think they would be disappointed they didn't get there last year. And I think that for this season to be a success, they need to be playing in that final weekend.
Yeah, a player to keep your eye on is Ella Peach. I think someone who Wallabies fans would know. She did marry Dylan Peach, I think, sometime this year, so that they're newly married. She has also officially signed with the Western Force, so you've got the Peach married couple both playing for the Western Force, which is awesome. I'd love to, hopefully she can get a little bit of Peach's magic, because what we're seeing him do over on the for the Western Force in the men's game. If she can do half of that in the women's game, she'll be a shoe-in for a Wallaroos jersey later in the season. So let's hope a big season for her. And I tend to agree with what you were saying there. I think out of all of the Super W teams and the squads, the Force probably look outside the Waratahs the most settled, and I'd expect them to really want to push for a good, consistent series this year and push the Waratahs. And it could be their opportunity or their year to take it out.
Yeah, they could do. And like when you have players that you can rely on, like Sarah Nagama coming through, I love Pia Tapsell. She adds so much punch and like bit of fight and scrap and dog into that team as well. They've got big players in that pack, like big, solid, ball running, defender shifting players. And I think that's what separates them at the moment from other Australian teams, obviously bar the Waratahs. Like this is a Force team that I think can do 10-woman footy really well if they have to, and are probably the best suited to all conditions. So I'm really excited to see. Obviously, they're missing out on this week, but they'll roll out. I can't remember who they've got. I think they actually go to Fiji for round 2. So a pretty tough start. The bye, and then they go all the way across and back.
Yeah, they do.
So that's going to be a really big challenge. If they can give things a really good shake over against the Drua in round 2, they set themselves up for success. Yeah. So I'm really excited for them, and I think that just rounds out our Super Rugby.
So
women's.
give me. Let's get your prediction. So what's your finishing table fixtures?
Finishing table. I'm going to say
not necessarily winning the final, but like end of regular season. Who's 1, 2, 3, 4?
You can't
five?
not tip the Tars to start with. I think the
You've seen the
amount
line.
of turnover.
I like it.
I think the amount of turnover that we've seen with the Drua makes them the really unstable factor, but we also know that like it's so hard to win over there. So for me, it's very clearly, I think Tars on top, Force are my 2 at the moment. It's a bit of a lottery from there for me. I feel like it could be any order, but that's a sellout. So I'm going to say Brumbies, Reds, Drua, but I think that could very easily be flipped in any which way. For me, there's a pretty clear 1 and 2 in my book. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm going I'll throw it out there. Let's say Force finish first, Tars second. Okay. Tars will win the final, but Force will finish first. Final's being played at Leichhardt Oval regardless, so it doesn't matter. We've locked that up. So say Force first, Tars second, Drua third, Reds fourth. No, Brumbies fourth, Reds fifth.
You just want to twist the knife.
Twist it in.
It's fair, but make sure, like as we said off the top, the more people who tune in and share Super Rugby Women's content, the more eyeballs that we get on it. Engage with your teams on social media. When they post women's team lists, when they post women's content, it is the best possible way to support, aside from actually getting down there. So please do your bit to get around Super W, because otherwise the competition will not grow and it will remain at this sort of level. We need more of it.
This is a bit of a left field question, Lockie, but if there's one thing that you'd love to see, this might even just be a pipe dream, but one thing you'd love to see by the end of Super W this season, what would it be?
One thing I'd love to see.
Could be anything.
I think I would like to see I think I'd like to see them select a composite side of players who aren't in the Wallaroos squad and have them run a trial match against the Roos.
Like I'm thinking like
old school gold v green kind of stuff. I reckon if there is a pipeline that directly results in non-Wallaroos players getting earmarked and getting an opportunity, I think that would be amazing. So taking the best of who aren't picked in that initial squad and running them as like their sort of sign off of the season, I think that would be a great byproduct. What about you?
I'd love to see that. I feel like to have something like that, first you need a head of high performance and you need a coach. And we don't have either of those.
Soon. They've been telling us soon.
They said soon 6 months ago.
I know.
No.
Oh my God.
I would love just to see, I've got 2 actually. First one is a pipe dream. I would just love to see one of these games like sell out. And I'm not talking like, they're not playing these at Allianz. They're not playing at HBF Park. They're playing at suburban ground. So I'd just love to see a good crowd show up and really give the women the respect and the admiration they deserve. I'd love to see that. And on a personal Waratahs front, I've said it before on the pod, I'd love to see Desi Miller play 15 sometime this season. Give her a crack.
Great shout. Great shout. Great shout. And very quickly, I know we're pushing our time, but we will get this in the last 2 minutes before we hit the hour mark. We are starting to see some alignment in the women's game with Premiership women's rugby in the UK. This is something that you and I have both been very vocal about. Getting Aussie players more consistently in the world's top competition, and it's starting. Tui Nakavadra, who we touched on before, will join Leicester at the end of the 2026 international season to get more game time up north. This was a formal press release. This wasn't just a story out of rugby.com.au either. So very clearly there is some alignment. Great to see the beginnings of hopefully more tight forwards in particular going across to England to play more footy. What do you see this as?
I'm on the fence with this one. Like initially, I was all against it because I initially didn't realize that when I saw the press release, I thought that she was off like straight away and that they missed Super W, and I was like, "This is bullshit. Why are we doing this?" But I've come to realize that it is post Super W, post international season, and it lines up, so it's fine. Why I still sit on the fence from the players' perspective, I think it's great to give them more exposure to professional outfits, to be playing alongside the likes of the Red Rose players and the players that will be forming that Lions series next year. That's invaluable experience, which is awesome. The reason I'm not solely stoked on it is it feels like this is a bit of a cop out from RA in that they're just sitting here saying, yeah, we've done this. This is our investment in women's rugby. It's like you haven't actually done anything. You've just allowed our players to be selected to go overseas. And if you're going to actually sit and say like, this is our investment in the women's game, well, it's not enough. And it's a Band-Aid for, it's a good thing. It is a bit of a step forward, but it's in the long term, it's not the big step forward, the leap forward that the women's game needs in Australia. And I just hope that this isn't like RA hanging their hat and saying, yeah, we've done a good job. Let's pat ourselves on the back by allowing this new contracting model. There's so much more they need to be doing.
Yeah, Band-Aid on a gunshot wound is probably the cynical way to look at it. And I think it's fair as well.
Shotgun, like a close-range shotgun wound where you've got four limbs hanging off.
It doesn't even touch the sides, but it is something. And I feel like until we have a more established high-performance setup that is publicly made available and the team to lead it, this is the kind of thing that I can get around because you are putting players in good environments. I don't feel as though this would be celebrated as a collaboration if it was just RA going, oh, we'll buy your plane ticket. Like there is very, at least to my, what I can read from this is that there are positions in place that they are supporting players across there as well, and that it's not going to be a find your own way, pay your own bills, rah, rah, rah. If it's literally like, we'll dump you in 22F and good luck, that's
I actually read it as in like RA's just allowing them to go and saying, we'll still select you for Wallaroos. Not so much like we're even going to pay you to go over and pay your fees. I mean, like for me, like there's so much more we could be doing in the domestic sense that RA could be putting the money into, like a full home and away Super W series, a full integrated Our Picky and Super W series that has home and away involved. Like those things would actually increase the development of the wider talent in Australian rugby, not just the elite, which is what we need. And I would love to see those things happen a little faster than just this little Band-Aid. But for the elite few that do get to go over, it is great.
Yeah, I completely agree. And hopefully this has shed a little bit of light on people who aren't as engaged or haven't been as engaged before in Super Rugby W. If you didn't realise that it was starting up this weekend, congratulations. You can and tune in because they are full calls. They are available on Stan Sport and, of course, get down if you're able. We will make sure that we fold in Super Rugby coverage into our wraps on Sunday and as well as a bit of our team list teasers and bits through extra time as well. Mitch, just about does us for the day. Is there anything else before we head off?
Just a big, again, shout out to everyone that, the Waratahs fans have been calling for the last few years to see the Waratahs play at Leichhardt Oval again. Well, this is your opportunity. The Waratahs women play at Leichhardt Oval on Saturday afternoon. Make sure you get there. No excuses other than that you might have, club rugby, but it's long weekend, so it is a bye. So do make sure that you get down there, support the Waratahs women's. They are the current Super W title holders. They have won, 5 out of 6 years or 4 out of 5 years. Like they're very good. Lot. So there's no excuse not to get down there and support them, and to see the Waratahs at Leichhardt Oval again is always a win.
It's huge. All right, thank you very much for sticking with us for the hour here on Extra Time. And make sure if you want more content like this and you're not one of our regular listeners, head across to Patreon. It's in all our social links at Scrumbags Rugby, where you can subscribe to Extra Time for just $5 a month to get an additional episode and all your bits and bobs ad-free too. Follow us on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, all the good stuff. We are there. We are mostly available and we'll sometimes get back to you. But until then, we'll be back to wrap up the first week of Super Rugby W and Super Rugby Pacific qualifying finals on Sunday, coming out Monday morning. Thank you very much, Mitch. We will be back then. Bye.
Bye.
We're not going to France for the croissants.